This is the horrific story of Joel Guy Jr. The parents that had given him birth were now the parents he had killed. The true and horrifying story of Joel Guy Jr. Welcome to Horror Boba. It was November 2016, Thanksgiving weekend in Tennessee. Family time for everyone, gatherings throughout the homes of loving families. Joel Jr. had arrived at his parents' house on Wednesday, November 23rd to spend a few nights there with his parents and his 3 sisters for Thanksgiving. Joel Guy Sr. and Lisa Guy were both engineers. Joel Sr. was 61 and Lisa Guy was 55. Joel Sr. had recently got laid off from his job. They came to agreement that they were ready to retire and live the rest of their lives together comfortably. They could do this if they stopped providing Joel Jr. with financial assistance. They also wanted him to learn to fend for himself because he was always relying on them. Joel Jr. was 28 years old at the time. He was studying to become a plastic surgeon in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, at Louisiana State University. His parents had supported him while he was in college for 9 years, but he withdrew a year prior to the murder. Suspicions grew when Lisa had not shown up for work on Monday. Since she was the one who had set up a meeting, it was odd that she would not show up for her own meeting. So her supervisor called her phone over and over and still no answer. She then decided to call the police and ask them to do a welfare check. The police went to the home of Lisa Guy and Joel Guy Sr. Once they arrived at the home, they felt an eerie presence. The police went through the garage and through the door that led them into the home. As the door opened, they felt heat coming from inside the home. Stepping into the home and through the kitchen, they saw that groceries were not put away and 2 wallets had been left on the table side by side. The police decided to put their gloves on, suspecting strange activities may have taken place there. They quickly discovered blood-splattered walls as they walked throughout the home. As they go to the second floor, they saw that inside an exercising room were a pair of bloody hands, just bloody, chopped off hands, without a body, and blood all around the room. They knew something was wrong, and they walked through the home. More and more body parts were found. So many terrifying scenes for the officers to see. The body parts were chopped up and scattered throughout the home. They found 2 45-gallon blue plastic containers with the victims' torsos and parts of their limbs. It was mixed with chemicals and acid solutions. He had used a mixture of drain cleaner, hydrogen peroxide, bleach, sewer liner cleaner, and other chemicals. The killings are suspected to have been taken somewhere between Friday and midday Saturday. Joel Guy Jr. had knifed his father to death in the upstairs exercising room, stabbing him 42 times. He also suffered from severe blows to the ribs that punctured his liver, lungs, and kidneys. Then he cut off his own father's hands and limbs. The autopsy showed that his hands were cut off at the wrist and his arms were cut off at the shoulder blade. His legs were sawed off at the hip and his right foot was removed at the ankles. The evidence indicated that the father fought for his life. This is where the police found the severed hands on the carpet floor next to the treadmill with blood stains throughout the room. Then he waited for his mother to come home from shopping for groceries, and he stabbed his mother to death. He stabbed her 31 times and severed 9 of her ribs. Her arms were removed at the shoulder and her legs were cut off below the knee. He then cut off her head and put it in a pot with boiling chemicals on the kitchen stove. This is where he decided to submerge both of the parents' torsos and body parts in the big blue plastic containers with the chemicals. He tried to blast the heat in the home to about 90 degrees so that it would melt off the fingerprints and speed up the decomposition. So he thought. At the time of the discoveries, he had gone to Louisiana where he resides. In the home, the investigators found a notebook in a backpack in the guest bedroom where Joel Jr. was staying during the holiday weekend that had crucial evidence of premeditated murder. In the notebook were plans on how to kill his own parents and what steps to take. He even wrote down exactly how he was going to get rid of them and how much money he was going to get from life insurance once they died. The notebook even had notes on how he was going to douse the killing rooms with bleach and flush chunks down the toilet and not the garbage disposal, so that it didn't have to get rid of no forensic evidence. The notes also detailed how he was going to place his father's body in a plastic bin and put it in the shower with his dead mother's body so it would wash off the evidence. He wrote about using sodium hydroxide to destroy his soft tissues and soften bones for transport. Base every hour to accelerate is what it wrote. Another page in the notebook showed details of the assets belonging to Lisa Guy, including a $500,000 life insurance policy that lists Joel Jr. as the beneficiary. Joel Jr.'s motive was from the fact that his parents were going to stop giving him financial support, so he thought that if he killed his parents, he would get the insurance money. Joel Jr. had written on a page in the notebook, $500,000 would all be mine with him missing or dead. I get the whole thing. Joel Jr. was 32 at the time of the trial. His trial went on for 5 days. His sisters had given emotional testimonies about how their parents were looking forward to retirement. The lead case detective describes how the smell and sight of the crime scene still haunts his dreams. The investigators had also found evidence of Joel Jr. shopping at a Walmart, purchasing the large bins and different types of chemicals. Also video footage of him shopping at different hardware stores collecting items for the killings. On October 2nd, 2020, a jury found Joel Jr. guilty on all 7 counts. He was charged, including 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder, 1 count of felony murder for killing Lisa Guy while committing first-degree murder of Joel Guy Sr., and 2 counts of felony murder while committing theft and 2 counts of abuse of a corpse. He will spend the rest of his life in prison.